Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Atthis-Age. I am Lisa Edmonds.
And I am Hope LaMonica.
And we are so glad that you joined our podcast today. Today, we've decided to talk about parenting our parents. Now, Hope and I want to give a disclaimer here on even one of our podcasts. We are not experts by any imagination. We just wanted to open up a forum where women of our age, or now we're discovering that men are interested in a lot of the things that we're saying. And so we just wanted to open a forum where we could talk about the things that we're dealing with at this age, with our kids and with our family and things like that. So Hope and I are only talking out of our own experience. So we don't have any expertise. There might be times that I or Hope have looked up some statistics on the internet, or maybe we've heard from a professional. Right. There'll be opportunities to where we're actually going to talk to professionals about those things. But we, by no means, are professionals.
Absolutely.
There are things we are professionals at.
Dating. Anyways, that's another subject.
Hope is a professional dater, and we're going to talk about it.
I don't know how to take that one.
Okay. She's had more experience, not like because she's just out there swinging. It's just over the last few years she's re-entering the dating field, and it is a completely different animal. And so we're going to talk about it. I learned that too. And there's certain people that if you're entering the dating field, you are going to be so surprised. So surprised at what it's like now. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But today we're going to talk about parenting our parents. I know that I've gotten to the age now, and my parents have gotten to the age to where it's almost unfair to call it a role reversal.
But it is.
But it kind of is. I'm very fortunate that my mother is still alive. She doesn't get on Facebook much, so I'm going to go ahead and mention her age, and then I might have to repost an apology if she gets mad. But my mother is 80 years old, just turned. Just turned. And she's married. And her husband is 10 years younger than she is. Wow. And so, And so my mother is actually doing quite well. She is vibrant. She is probably one of the healthiest people I've ever met. So I haven't really crossed that bridge with my mom, but I have with my father, who is single, 84 years old, and lives in Las Vegas.
Wow.
So, it's been a different turn of events. Yeah. And so, Hope has had a very, very interesting journey with parenting her parents. Because not only did she have that opportunity with her father that raised her, but she also had the opportunity to meet and have that experience with her biological father.
Yes.
So I think that's really fascinating, and I think if you want to kind of speak to that, Hope, about the journey you had with both of your fathers.
Sure. So my daddy who raised me, he passed away 2 years ago at the age of 79, and so my dad was always he was golfing 3 times a week. He was just very independent, doing things on his own. And there were times that, I had to jump in and say, Dad, do you really think you should be doing that? And he would do that. I'm the father. You shouldn't be telling me what to do, type of thing. But as our parents, we have to worry about people preying on them. There's people calling, trying to sell them things, trying to get them to donate money to things. And I found out after he passed away, like how much money he was actually giving away. I mean, I found receipts for $2,500, $5,000 that he was giving to people out of the kindness of his heart because he was a good person. And it was like, I felt bad because I felt I should have been more involved in knowing what was going on, knowing what's going on with their health, knowing what's going on with going to the doctors, or do they have memory lapse problems? Should they be driving the car anymore? Those type of things. When do you make those decisions? When do you jump in? And then my biological father is 77, and he's had some health things come up recently, and so it's trying to stay involved in that and knowing what's going on. And am I the daughter, and when am I, do you think you should be doing this? Should you do it this way? Without, the Bible tells us to honor our parents, but at some point it's like we need to step in and be in control.
Yeah, and you want to be respectful. So I know we've had a journey with my father in Las Vegas where his health is declining, and I do have a 22-year-old brother who was present in the house with him. But what 22-year-old do you know?
A 22-year-old brother?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
Just journey with my dad. I have a brother who's about 68, and then probably 66. Let me not age him too fast. He's 66, all the way down to a brother who turned 23 actually in October.
Wow.
So that is what that is. But as my father has gotten older, and he's always been very independent, right? My parents divorced when I was 16, and my dad spent some time in Europe, and then he spent some time in Las Vegas where he had another son. But now that he's gotten older, and still very much wants his independence, but his health doesn't warrant him being independent.
Right.
There's a lot of things I could talk about, but out of respect for him, we had to go into his house, hire professional cleaners and different things, and then try to help him make the decision to move into an assisted living. And it has probably been the hardest move that me and my siblings have had to endure, because my father is very much in his right mind, but physically he's breaking down. And I've had to do welfare checks. I've had to send the police to his home in Las Vegas because he didn't pick up his phone for 3 days.
Oh my gosh.
And, without the consistency of a younger brother who's just
in his own world.
He is who he is, living his life. So, I'm having to do that. And so I don't know how many times all of us siblings, 4 or 5 of my siblings, we've had to sit down and say, what's best for dad? And in the end, respecting him, respecting his wishes. We had a point where he was pretty sick. And by the grace of God, he makes it back into life. And his first thing is, I want to go home.
Right.
I want to be in my home.
Right.
And my father has said things like, if you put me in a home or an assisted living, I'm going to die there.
Right.
And that's true.
Right.
You know what I mean? And there's something about the level of independence that actually kind of keeps them alive, because, they're working on their own. But then again, when do you have to draw the line at their safety? And like you said, there are a whole underbelly of people who prey on senior citizens.
Absolutely.
I remember my grandmother, who was widowed fairly early in her 60s, and in her 80s, we're coming over to her house, and she's got a $7,000 vacuum cleaner. Why does my grandmother, who can't even use her left arm, now have a $7,000 vacuum cleaner? Well, somebody came and just, you need this and you need that, and she did it. And then, someone calling her and saying, you owe these taxes, you need to send this money to wherever.
Right.
Yeah, and she's like, if my mother hadn't caught that one, she'd have been 10 grand in the hole. And I hate to say it out loud, but there are family members that will prey on your elderly parents.
Yes.
And what they have. And so, but there's that really fine line, right? Because they are your parents, and you love them and you respect them. The Bible tells us to respect them, and they're going to be, we're going to be them someday.
Yes,
that's the thing.
For my children, though.
Right?
Yes.
Right. Oh, I got plans for my old one.
Yes.
Anyway, I'm going to pee on her couch. I'm going to pee on her couch and sit there and smile
about it.
Smile about it. Wait till she gets a new one. And then I'm going to be like, that's for 1998 when, or whatever.
Whenever you did that.
Whenever you did that. But you know what I mean? But it's because we're going to be in those very same shoes.
Yes.
And so I sit back and I think about that. What would I want, but what's for his safety? And then there's the expense of it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Oh, the expense of it.
The average assisted living home is, I have friends that are doing that now, and it's averages between $6,000 and $8,000 a month.
Yes.
A month.
Yes.
Who, unless they've invested and saved well,
yeah,
then what do you do?
What do you do? And
Right.
even if you do have that, like my father's like, I can live at home for 200. You know
Right.
what I mean? And
Right.
once we pitched the cost to him, I mean, with him it was very fortunate. He did have money put aside.
Right.
But he's very conscientious, and he's sitting here going, what if I live to 100? Can I afford $8,000 a month
Right.
for the next 16 years? Who could?
Nobody. Yeah.
Right, and there's the expense of it. Then you have to sit back and go, you know, here are me and my siblings, rock, paper, scissors. Whose house is dad going to?
Right.
And how are we going to be able to care for him?
Right.
And I know that he never wanted to be in that position.
Absolutely.
You know, and I know, listen, I'm not nearly as prepared as my father was.
Right.
My father was a GS-16 for the United States Air Force for probably 30 years. Retirement was good. Fortunately or unfortunately, he had outlived his siblings, and so a lot of the fallback was there. But as these years, it is incredibly expensive
It goes
to
up.
get older.
Yes.
I mean, the time, and it was hundreds of thousands of dollars for him to be in the hospital for 6 weeks.
Right. My dad was in the hospital from October to February. So imagine
Wow, yeah.
having that expense. And
Yeah.
luckily, he had 2 very good health insurance plans.
But it's a real thing. I mean, I've even said to myself, and I've said to my kids, I'm just going to have to X myself out at 70. I can't afford to live past a certain age.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because of how expensive it is. But we've had to walk a really, really fine line with our parents. There's the line between, you know, guarding them and protecting them. You know, my dad, he and pride, right? He needs assistance. But do you think he wants a stranger helping him bathe?
Right. Right. And
Or in his house? Like, he's very suspicious. He's like,
people.
you know, I need a safe for all my jewelry. And he may be right.
right.
You know what I mean? And so he's, you know, just at that age, because you can't physically defend yourself the way you used to, then there's a fear.
Right.
There's a fear of strangers, and there's a fear of people. Or you swing the other way and you start going, oh, they're so great, they're so this, and they're predatory people.
So my dad, please, I pray she's not watching this, but his girlfriend was the same age as I am. Well, a few years older, so she was 57.
There's that.
There's that. So I had a whole issue with that, but on the other hand, she would go down and give him his medication. She would clip his toenails, whatever it was, take him to his doctor's appointments. So she was good as far as that. But then the other side of me goes, well, what is it that you want with a man who's very, very financially stable?
Yeah.
So those are the things that, as we start parenting our parents, that you think about, you watch out for their safety.
Yeah, yeah. And there has to be, you know, I think even now, let's say your parents are very independent and they're fine, just like my mother, you have to start the conversation.
Absolutely.
I think it's very important that you determine and you talk to them now, before they have the health crisis, before they have the financial crisis. Mom, Dad, should these things begin to happen, what do you want? You know, one of the things that happened with my dad when he got very, very sick, and even though he was in his right mind, when he became very sick, his mind went.
Right.
His mind went for a season. And so one of my sisters had to take over being power of attorney. But the nice thing was, is she had developed that relationship with my dad, this trust factor. He'd been asking her for some other things, that as difficult and as hard as it was, she was ready.
Right.
She was ready. And she carried a tremendous amount of weight. Again, through the grace of God, he popped out of it. He was once again deemed competent to govern his own affairs. Now, part of us was upset about that, because, okay, you know, he can talk through those sentences and he can have a conversation with you, but then is it competent when you know he can't cook for himself, but he prefers to stay in his own home and not let the healthcare aid in? Is that competent? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like, Dad, let her in. He's like, no, I don't want anybody
In my house.
In my house. I don't
Right,
want
right.
anybody in my house. And we're like, Dad, you can't. You're okay with eating expired food.
No, not good. Not good.
You know what I mean? I said, and he was like, well, you know, the thing that got me was like, yo, you kids ate expired food all the time growing up. We're like, we did? I think we got by. And I was like, mental note on the stomach aches when I was 5. Mental note on that.
Oh my
you know, because you're like, you know, so for him it was like, this isn't something I newly developed. We cut that nasty part off the cheese when you were 5. Right? This is not a problem. We just peeled the mold off that bread and you still ate it.
You're still good. You're here.
Right? Yeah. So for him, he's like, why are you tripping?
Right.
But for us, we're like, man, this is our dad. And for him, you know, when we think about a retirement community in Arizona at $5,000 a month, we think you're clean, you're protected, you're well fed. Their perspective is, you took me out of my home.
Right.
I'm away from what I know. You're sending me here to die. They think that. That literally is the difference in the thinking. And so I know my siblings and I, we've had to make peace with my younger brother and the fact that he's at least there.
Right.
And we know that he won't completely and totally abandon my dad, even though he doesn't care for them the way we would or someone at a facility would. My brother, my siblings make very frequent, I probably only will get out there every 6 months, but they make very frequent visits.
Right.
You know, and now it's this thing to where he expects the pop in. We can't treat him like he's 60 and can hold his own. Part of parenting your parents is checking in more often.
Yes.
You know, we get into our own lives. And we can get, you know, you have young adult daughters,
Right.
I have young adult daughters, we have jobs, budding friendships,
Right.
and but we have to stop and we have to say, yeah, I need to be on top of my parents. Maybe the way, you know, I would talk to my daughter every week while she's in college. You know, we've got to touch base because things have changed.
Right. And having those, I know I used to talk to my dad about 3 times a week, and you could tell the more you talk to them, if there's things that are changing or if they're a conversation or they're repeating stories, that's when you're going to pick that up. If you're talking to them more frequently.
Yeah. If they talk about the $7,000 vacuum cleaner they just bought or how they had to give into their taxes, you're going to learn if someone's dipping into their finances when they shouldn't be.
Right.
You know? So it is quite the journey. There's a lot of emotion involved. There is definitely this balance you have with respect and care to look after your parents. My strong encouragement is to increase your communication with your parents and with your siblings about your parents. So everybody's on board and everybody understands and everybody sees. I think you work really, really hard to try to respect your parents' wishes as long as you can keep them safe.
Right. And my suggestion would be to get a living will, to get, I meant to bring it today, but it's called 5 Wishes. And it tells your parents are able to fill this out and you can fill this out, saying if you were unable to speak for yourself, what you would want to happen. Would you want to be kept on a ventilator? Would you want to be kept in your own home? Would you want to go in hospice? It goes into detail. So when you have to make those decisions, I mean, my dad was on a ventilator and on dialysis towards the end, and having to make that decision on, do we take him off? Do we leave him on? What would he want? I mean, he wasn't competent enough.
That's excruciating.
So that would be my advice. Please get that in writing for yourself, for your family members, anyone.
Yeah. So hey, I wanna kind of end on that because I think that was probably one of the strongest pieces of wisdom I said we can give anybody who's dealing with aging parents. Get the 5 wishes and find out what your parents' wishes are in all of these circumstances. that unfortunately is a high likelihood that you're going to be dealing with, because you can't ask them if it gets too far. And it is extremely painful for your siblings to get together and try to figure it out. Like I said, I'm graced that my dad is alive, but it was very touch and go for a moment, and we were saying, what would he want? And we were guessing. And 5 kids have 5 different opinions.
Yeah.
So get with your parents. Get with your parents right now. Talk to them, and it is a surefire way to be able to do exactly what they want. And that is the most respectful thing that you can do. Well, listen, you guys, thank you so much for taking the time to sit here and visit with us at This Age. Please like, comment, share. This is also going to be on our YouTube channel, and we want you to go to that, subscribe to that, so you can see every time Hope and I make a new video. Thank you so much for joining us, for having this conversation with us, and we'll talk to you again soon.